Your favorite book has just reached 100 subscribers.
Yay!
Thank you to all of you who are following.
In the month of October, we will be doing another readathon. This readathon will be themed on vampires.
Yeah.
We're starting with Twilight, then Salem's Lot, The Serpent and the Wings of Night, and closing out with Dracula. At the end of our readathon, we will again be posting a tier list ranking those 4 books. So follow along here to find that, and we will be posting our calendar in our Discord as well.
Thanks for listening.
Hello and welcome to Your Favorite Book. I'm Malorie.
I'm Tanner.
We're siblings.
We like reading books.
And today we are doing our September wrap-up.
Yay.
It's September, right?
Yes.
Okay. Sometimes I get confused. We have another wrap-up video for you today. We will be talking about all of the books that we've read in September, why we liked them, why maybe we didn't like them, and hopefully we can encourage each other to maybe read one of them.
Can you get me to read your smutty YA romance again?
This one wasn't even smutty!
Oh, good. Free of smut. Then
Smut
count
free,
me out.
also known as clean romance. Just kidding. Okay, I'll get started. Number 1.
You have an important announcement to make.
Well, I do?
Yeah?
What is
You're in a play.
Oh,
Duh.
yeah, that is
And
it.
that's why you're reading this book.
Yes, okay, so I've gone back to school this semester. I'm in Percy Jackson the musical.
Hooray.
The Lightning Thief. This is obviously based off of The Lightning Thief, the first Percy Jackson novel by Riordan, which I am also rereading currently.
That's one of your favorite books.
It is one of my very favorite books. I have such a sweet place in my heart for Percy Jackson. All things Percy Jackson. I've loved it ever since it came out. I followed all of the books as they released, and it's just so exciting for me to be in the show. I'm getting the opportunity to play Annabeth, which is one of my favorite literary characters, period. Top of the bunch. I love her so much, so it's an honor to be able to explore this and play that.
Yeah.
So I've been rereading the first book with my husband, who's been cast as Luke.
Skywalker.
Yeah, exactly. It's a
mashup.
Star Wars fusion. But he's never read Percy Jackson, so he's reading it for the first time, and he's really enjoying it.
Oh, good. Are you listening to it?
Yeah, we're listening to it on
Nice.
Audible or whatever. It's a pretty good narrator. I really enjoy the narrator.
That always makes it easier.
It does, yeah. I love Percy Jackson. It's so funny and refreshing, and every time I read it, I appreciate it in different ways. And every time I read it, I still laugh. Like, I think that's worth a lot.
I read it when it first came out when I was a kid, and I loved it. It's a portal fantasy, kind of similar to Harry Potter, but the characters go into a Greek mythology world, right?
Yeah, in Percy Jackson, the Greek gods are real, and they sometimes have children who are called half-bloods or demigods, and they go on quests, and each demigod has different skills depending on who their parent is.
Which is so cool.
It's so interesting. Percy Jackson is a son of Poseidon, so he has a lot of water powers. He's a fantastic sword fighter. He's super sassy.
He can talk to fish.
He can talk to fish and dolphins and horses.
He's a regular Aquaman.
He's a regular Aquaman at the ripe old age of 12 years old.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but in this story, the main 3 gods from Greek mythology, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, they're not supposed to have children.
Yes.
But the other gods do regularly have children.
Yes.
And
the big 3 gods have children that are so powerful.
That's right.
That they have made a pact
been a while.
to never have children again, because when they do have children, it usually is the cause, like, canonically, I think it's implied that, like, World War I and World War II were the cause of those big 3 children happening. So it's very dangerous. There's also a huge prophecy that has been waiting for a child of the big 3. So when Percy is born, it kind of starts this huge prophecy event that
like
takes
the world
place.
is going to end,
Yeah.
and Percy has to save it.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. I love it. The musical
I'd love
also,
to reread it.
Yes, you totally should. The musical's really great, too. They pull a lot of great stuff from the book. Like, there's a lot of word-for-word dialogue that comes from the book straight to the musical, which is really fun. The music is fantastic. Like,
I was very surprised that there was a musical made off the book.
It's a little bit shocking. I followed it ever since it was first started off-Broadway, and then as it moved onto off-Broadway in New York, and then onto It actually never got on Broadway, technically. But the cast recording is phenomenal. Bastards. I know. It's actually really sad. Percy Jackson was going on at the same time that Hadestown was, and there was another Greek
There's
musical,
too much Greek.
There was a Greek play going on at the same time. So, you know...
My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Yeah, that's what it was. Just kidding. But the musical's great. I would highly recommend it to anybody. The music is very rock concert-y. Like, it's a pop current musical.
That makes sense. It's like a modern story. Yeah,
there's great guitar riffs. There's so much fun stuff to it. Like, it's fun. I love it. And the script is great, too, so... On to my third book. You'll never guess what it is. It's another Percy Jackson book, you guys.
You're an addict.
I am an addict. I love Percy Jackson. Oh my gosh, I just forgot another book I read this month, which was a Percy Jackson fan fiction.
Oh, that's right. You told me about that.
I did. Okay, real quick. This is Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Chalice of the Gods.
It's a good cover.
It is. It's fantastic. So... this book follows Percy in his senior year of high school, and he's trying to get into...
Spoilers.
Yes, spoilers.
If you want to read the series.
Skip ahead a little bit if you want to read this. This book has been out for like a year and a half.
So the first book, he's like a middle schooler.
He's 12 years old in the first book.
12 years old, yeah. So it reads young. It's like a middle grade book.
Yes. This book takes place after Percy Jackson and the Olympians, and then Heroes of Olympus, which is the second arc with more characters. This takes place after all of that. He's a senior in high school trying to get into the New Rome University. But in order to do that, he has to get letters of recommendation from the gods. So he has to go on all of these really stupid little quests for the gods to try to get those letters of recommendation.
Oh, that's fun. It's kind of like Hercules. I remember that story of Hercules. He had to do all these dumb little quests for the gods. Yeah,
it's so much fun. The characters are seniors in high school, so it's a little bit older, but it's still... I don't know. I think this could still probably be borderline middle grade. Like, it still reads that same young, extremely humorous. I'm really enjoying it. The second book in the series recently came out, and so I need to finish this one to read the second one.
He's just a powerhouse. He's such a smart author. I really like Rick Riordan. From what I've heard about him as a person, I like him as a person. Especially when they came out with like the cast of the Percy Jackson movie, and he's like, "This is Annabelle." All that stuff.
Yeah, Annabeth for the series, for the Disney Plus series.
Yes, I was like, huge support for that. I love that, and just his ability to represent characters with mental health disorders. Was also great. From what I remember, I only maybe read the first 3 Percy Jackson books.
Yeah, they do handle that very well. They also. The majority of the demigods, all of them have ADHD and dyslexia, so there's a lot of other like disabilities in there too that I feel very represented in. Some of his earlier books, sometimes there's a little bit of sexism, a little bit, but as he got older and more aware of things, I really love Rick Riordan. There's also a lot of really great queer representation among all of his work too.
Great.
Yep.
Yeah, I really appreciate those things. I also think he's just a very smart author because it's been how many years? Maybe 29, 30. Well, because I'm 30 almost. The first book came out when I was very young, but after Harry Potter. So maybe in the 2000s?
Yeah, I think so.
Early 2000s. So yeah, it's been like almost over 20 years since he's been writing in the same series.
Yeah, and people still eat it up. I mean, I purchased the second book of this the day that it came out. 2005.
Okay, so 2005. So it's almost 20 years.
Yeah.
It's really smart to choose a genre and keep writing in that genre, especially if you want to build a career as a creative person.
Yeah.
I think about Diary of a Wimpy Kid by Jeff
Kinney.
I almost... Never mind. I was going to say... Never mind. I'm not going to say it. Jeff Kinney wrote Diary of a Wimpy Kid. Like, he's still writing Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and the dude rakes in the cash. So, not just for financial reasons, but as, like, building a career, I think it's smart to choose a series and to keep writing in that. Sanderson does a similar thing with his Cosmere.
Yeah.
And to choose Greek mythology as your world-building element is really smart. You can pull
so much from that.
And it's free IP. Like, this book really did get me interested in mythology in general.
Me too.
I love all mythology.
I do too.
I love Norse mythology, Egyptian mythology, Native American mythology. Like, those stories of ancient humans are so fascinating. So it's brilliant to capitalize on that as well.
And I like that he's not, this is going to sound bad, he's not a sellout. He doesn't just pump them out one after another after another. Like, he waited a long time before he even announced this. And, I mean, everybody thought he was done with the Percy Jackson series. And then he announced The Sun and the Star, which is Nico D'Angelo and Will Solis, which are more characters in the Percy Jackson series. That book came out, and now he's releasing... Right now, there's 3 confirmed of this Percy Jackson senior year kind of thing. But it's taken him a long time to even prepare that, let alone announce it and publish it. So it's interesting.
You can tell that he wants to tell this story.
Yeah, he wants to craft it.
He's not trying to be a shill.
Yeah.
Like you said, sell out.
Yeah.
Like some other authors that we know. Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. I'm talking to you.
Yes, with a glaring eye.
Yeah. So it differs with each author.
Yeah, it definitely does.
But I think Riordan's one of the good ones.
I love him so much!
As a distant fan, I need to read the series. It'd be fun just to go through that whole series.
I reread Percy Jackson, the first book, probably once a year.
Wow.
I just love it so much. It's a huge comfort book for me.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know it so well, I just kind of pick it up, finish it in an afternoon.
Yeah.
Or
I do that with my favorite books too.
Yeah, or if I'm like, oh, I want to read Titan's Curse, or, like, I'll just pick up any of them because I'm so familiar with the story, I can jump in. Whenever.
Yeah. Well, you may have convinced me to read that series.
You should.
It'll be fun.
It's so great. Now, can I talk about the fan fiction that I read?
Yes, let's talk about that.
You guys.
Because I remember when you did this, you said that you basically didn't sleep for like 2 days.
Okay, I got sick, right? A week after school started. A whole bunch of stuff goes around that first week of school. And so I was sick in bed for like 2 days in a row. And I read nonstop for 2 days in a row. The fan fiction was 300,000 words. And I finished it in less than 48 hours.
Oh my goodness.
It was so good.
I can't do that.
The fan fiction was called The Long Game. It was written by Captain Jackson, which is a very well-known Percy Jackson fan fiction writer. And they write a Percy Jackson Pirates fan fiction. That's where their username comes from, Captain Jackson.
So do they have any characters from the books, the mainline canon books, in their fan fiction?
Yes.
Okay.
All
of them?
Pretty much.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So The Long Game was a Percy Jackson fan fiction with Percy Jackson and Annabeth Chase as hopeful Olympians. Annabeth Chase was a volleyball hopeful Olympian. She'd made it to the previous year of Olympics but had to step out due to trauma. And then Percy Jackson is a Olympic swimmer. He's already received 3 Olympic medals, and he's trying to get in there again to get more Olympic medals. And they both have to work together. They both go to the same college. And this, you guys, when you're talking about fan fiction, you need to forget about the real world and not put any real world consequences into the books.
Okay.
Because if you explain it out loud, you're like, I know this would never happen. I know it would never happen, but it doesn't matter. The university hires Percy and Annabeth to pretend to be dating so they can get publicity for their school to be the next Olympic hopeful sweethearts.
Okay. That's not so far out of the realm of possibility, I think.
Yeah.
I think stuff like that does happen.
I think it could happen.
Where agents get their celebrities to date each other.
Yeah, or for sure.
To pretend that they're dating each other.
Yeah, and Percy Jackson, his father in this fanfiction is
Poseidon.
A past Olympic swimmer. He's from Greece. His name is Poseidon's original Greek name, which I can't pronounce.
Oh, it is actually Poseidon.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like he had a fake dad.
No, it's really Poseidon, but I mean, he's not really a god.
He's just like reincarnated himself as a human.
He's just not a god. It's like mortal AU.
Okay, fan fiction.
Universe.
I had to think fan fiction. It's their own little thing.
So it's the same characters, but it's in the real world. They're not actually demigods.
Okay.
And so Percy Jackson is pretty much a little bit filthy rich because his dad abandoned him and felt bad for it, and then he became an Olympic swimmer, and now he's like, oh, here's all my money, please love me. Annabeth Chase has been estranged from her family, and so she works 3 jobs and trains like 24/7 while she's going to school to get a degree in architecture. And so Percy's like, this poor girl needs some help. I'm gonna go convince the university to give her a scholarship to pretend to date each other for this thing. So it happens. So it's a whole fake dating AU. It's so good, Tanner. It was so good.
I don't think you can convince me to read
Oh,
this.
no. I will never make you read it. I will never make you read it. I loved it so much. The author did such a great job capturing Percy and Annabeth, but making them their own unique characters, too. Like, it just was fantastic. The writing was really, really incredible.
That's the cool thing about fan fiction is that you never know what it might inspire. There's so many popular books, obviously, that have come from fan fiction, like 50 Shades of Grey.
Well, 50 Shades of Grey.
Twilight fan fiction. There's a lot of different ones.
There's Ali Hazelwood is a very, very well-known contemporary romance writer, and one of her most popular ones is a Raylo fan fiction that you can still find on Wattpad.
That's cool. So you never know where this one that you read, who knows where it might go.
Yeah, and there's another Harry Potter one that's super popular that's called Manacled, and that author just got a book deal to republish Manacled.
Whoa.
Just with some changes to make it their own thing.
Yeah, well,
it's really cool.
I think our perspective of like fan fiction has changed over time. Like it used to be seen as this bad thing, or like you're just a shill or a hack. Yeah. But I think every author starts out as a fan fiction author. Yeah. Every single one.
Yeah.
Like,
it's an easy place to start.
Of course.
Yeah.
No, it is, because where else will you get your inspiration from? Like, I've been inspired to write by the books that I love.
Yeah.
And the first stories that I wrote were very similar to them.
Yeah, exactly.
And over time, you learn how to write something that isn't so derivative, to the source material. But it's still heavily inspired. Like, you're still going for the same tone, same type of story, same type of world building.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I just really loved that piece of work. I'm still thinking about it 2 weeks later.
Wow.
Like, I really enjoyed it. The characters were super interesting, and they did a great job. Excuse me. They did a great job at incorporating characters and moments from the original book into their story as a way to be like, here's a nod to the people who see this bit of dialogue. And the way that they fit all of the characters within their world, it was so well thought out, so interesting, and it was fun to see, like, how Thalia exists in this world. She's a part of a rock band, and, it just was so great. I loved it so much. I highly recommend it if you're a Percy Jackson fan.
And if you're a YA romance fan.
Yeah, if you're a YA romance fan, I definitely recommend it. It was fantastic.
Cool.
Yep.
Well, do you want to tell me about the other book you read?
Yes, here's my last book. This book is called Revelle by Lisa Mia Smith. I really enjoyed this book. I've been eyeing it for a while because the cover is just so pretty.
It's like a kaleidoscope.
Yeah, it is, which is important to the story. I really enjoyed it. It's a YA fantasy set in 1920s Prohibition era.
Okay, so is it a kind of like a portal fantasy or an urban fantasy?
Yeah, it's more of a portal fantasy. There's people who have magic and people who don't have magic. And there's 3 types of magic in this world. One of them is Ephigean magic, which allows them to condense things, or it's called like potent magic, kind of, where like people say don't drink Ephigean drinks because they can take the alcohol of 3 drinks and combine it into 1 drink that will get you hammered way faster. So they can condense things into...
Make them stronger.
Things. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then there's Chronos magic, which is time travel. And then there's Revelle magic, which is what the book is named after. And these people can take gems and then burn them and use them to create vivid fantasies for other people.
Pretty differing range of magic skills.
Yeah.
So before you move on, just to define what a portal fantasy is versus an urban fantasy. So an urban fantasy would be something like, there's a popular D&D show called Dimension 20. They do a series called The Unsleeping City, where everyday New Yorkers live their lives not knowing that magic is around them, but some people among them can see magic, and they see it all over the place. That is like an urban fantasy, where it's like people living in a normal contemporary setting and there's magic abound. A portal fantasy is something like Harry Potter or Percy Jackson, where they travel from like Ohio to another city like Hogwarts or the camp, where there's magic everywhere, where it's like a portal into a magical world.
So I think this is still a portal city. Portal fantasy because the only place in the world that has magic is the city that this book is based in.
Exactly.
And people travel to that city to experience the magic and then go back to
so it's a portal
regular
fantasy.
Life. Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you for explaining that to me.
Yes.
This book follows Lux Revelle, which I read this book and then listened to the audiobook, and at first I called her Luxe because it's spelled Luxe.
Yeah.
Which I feel like should be Luke's.
Typical fantasy stuff
but that's
where you don't know how the names are pronounced.
It's Lux. I will do what you ask me to.
Because your characters' names have to be special.
Yes. She is the headliner of the Revelle spectacle, which is this like acrobatic trapeze circus. It takes place in a big tent, and it's this whole family of cousins that all live together, and they're all these Revelle magicians, and they perform these amazing spectacles, and that's how they make their money. And then after the show, you can go to the fun house, and it's like kind of like, it's so bizarre. I don't know how to explain it. It's like,
it sounds like nothing I've read before. Yeah, actually.
Yeah, it's so you can go to the fun house and you can give the Revelle magicians a gem, and in return they will take your gem and use it to show you your wildest fantasy. So it's like adjacent to sex workers, but with magical fantasies. It was interesting. I don't know how to explain it. But Revelle is the headliner. She's the star of the show. And she's different than the rest of the Revelles because all of the other Revelles need those gems to use magic, and she doesn't need the gems. She can use her magic without gems, but the cost is pain. So she can use her magic, but...
Ow!
Yeah, exactly. But it's like severe. She passes out regularly because she uses her magic. Okay. But it's a secret. No one knows that. And their circus has what?
I was going to say boring as a cost to your magic system. I'm sorry, I'm going to say boring as a cost to your magic system, but whatever. It's typical. It doesn't have to be your main focus. I understand.
I agreed with it at first, but as the story goes on, there's a turn in the end that I was like, oh.
What do you mean by
for the cost of the magic system?
It changes?
The understanding changes.
Of what she's actually doing?
Of what she's actually giving up. It's not just pain.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, which I will not spoil because I really enjoyed it and I don't want to spoil that.
Because that's something like in Aragon that we read recently where it's like, Aragon uses too much magic. He gets really tired, so take a nap and eat a sandwich.
Yes.
It's just a boring, typical way of like, that's what it requires to use your magic.
Yeah.
Something like... Goose Girl is great because there's like a societal cost to using her magic, which is very interesting. There's lots of different ways you can play around with that. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
It's really cool. But their family of Revelles has run out of alcohol, and there's only one person who they can get alcohol from, and it's one of the Kronos magicians. The Kronos people own the town. They're the mayors of the town, and they're time travelers. So if anybody ever tries to usurp them, some perfectly timed accident happens. Because they went back in time to cancel or undo people trying to usurp them. So Lux has to trick the Kronos guy into giving them alcohol, which he agrees to, but it isn't actually the correct guy.
Okay.
The guy who's Kronos gives his coat to this poor dude. And she's like, oh, that's him. It's his coat and his pin on his lapel. So she's like, ooh, give me all your alcohol. And he's like, I would give you all the alcohol in the world. And she's like, yay. And then she finds out he's this poor peasant boy who can't give her anything. He was just hopelessly in love. It was so interesting. I loved the magic system. There were a lot of, like, dramatic adolescent teen moments. Sometimes it felt a little bit out of place. The kind of, like dystopian YA, the world is so bad. Kind of, I was like, oh, okay. Can we get back to the plot points a little bit? But overall, I really enjoyed it. There was a good love triangle thing going on. It's just your kind of classic YA fantasy.
Just a good type of book in that genre.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and there was a lot of unique qualities about the magic system and the setting of the world specifically that I really enjoyed.
To me. I think as we've done this podcast, I've realized just how important the love triangle trope is to YA fantasy.
I think it's required.
I think it is too.
I think it's required.
And I have been debating throughout this entire thing if, like, do I just really not like romance?
Or do you just not love triangles?
Or, yeah, well, I think that's a part of it, right? Obviously, the pitch of a good romance story is like, who is the main character going to fall in love with? Mm-hmm. Is it going to be he or she or them or whoever? And, you know, a love triangle is totally natural.
Yeah.
When you're, like, deciding who you want to be with. Mm-hmm. And I love shows. I don't know if sitcom is the right word to describe them, but whatever The Office or 30 Rock or New Girl, like, I love those shows.
Yeah, those are sitcoms.
Yeah. They are basically the same thing as a YA romance, but without all the fantasy and the dramatic storytelling.
Yeah.
It's comedy.
Yeah.
I love comedy. I love the jokes. But I also find something like, well, maybe not so much anymore, just because I've seen it so much, but like The Office, like Jim and Pam, their love triangle, Pam and Roy and Jim. Right?
Yeah.
That stuff's relatively interesting. Mm-hmm. And even the stuff with like Michael, finding his one true love. His story's a lot more silly.
Yes.
But something like 30 Rock, it's similar, where it's about Liz Lemon and about another main character, Jack. Mm-hmm. Them finding their own true loves. And there's tons of like interesting ways that they make their romances engaging to watch. And they're always about the main character's internal struggle to like, I'm in love with this person. Well, why? What does it mean to me that I'm attracted to this person? What does that say about myself and who I am and what I want? That stuff's really interesting because your relationships give you a glance into who you are as a person.
Yes.
And if you're invested in that person's internal journey, then those romances, those relationships matter to you. Yeah. Because they say a lot about who you are and how you're changing as a person. Yeah. Because a good romance story, I think, they should make those characters, that the love interests, change the main character.
Yes, this book does that very well. Cool. There's the poor peasant boy who she genuinely feels a strong connection with and enjoys and cares for, versus the Kronos guy who she has to kind of pretend to be in love with to get the alcohol that her family needs to be successful and to get the money that her family needs to be successful. And initially she's like, well, the Kronos guy's fine. I like him.
But I'm using him.
But she's there as an obligation to protect her family. And
does she fall in love with him over time?
No.
Okay.
She thinks she could love him, but it's because she has to be with him in order to secure her family. Yeah.
That's great. I like all that conflict. Yeah. And they're two different types of relationships.
Yeah. And he is a time traveler. And at a point in the book, spoiler alert, at a point in the book, she meets up with him and he's 30 years older than when he was 10 minutes ago. And she's like, what happened? And he said, someone tried to kill you and I had to come all the way back here to save you. And the price for time travelers in this book is every 1 second takes away 10 times that of your life. So he went back 7 weeks and lost 15 years of his life. And he ages that much time going back. Jeez. So then she's like, oh, I was starting to like him, but now he's 35 years old and I'm 19.
But he did this for me.
But yeah, exactly. And he's like, we've grown so close. And she's like, you erased all that time that we grow close. What am I supposed to do here? But it was so interesting. I really enjoyed the dynamic between the time traveler guy and the lead because she was forced to stay with him and forcing herself to stay with him. And he was time traveling multiple times to ensure that they stayed together. Yeah. So it was interesting. I enjoyed the time travel. I think it was done better in this book than I've seen it in other books.
Yeah, the thing about time travel is that it's such a powerful ability that it needs to have a really good cost. Yeah. Or your story just needs to be a comedy and it's like, it doesn't matter how powerful it is or what the cost is.
Yeah, and I liked the continuity in this book because after she learned more about his ability to time travel, she would be like, every morning she'd wake up and she'd be like, what do I remember? This is what I remember. Okay, he hasn't gone back. He hasn't erased this from my memory. And they describe what happens when they do time travel, like what happens to their body in the world when they time travel back, and then there's two of them at the same time. So it was interesting. Yeah.
Cool. Well, sounds like an interesting book. Not really genre pushing, but that doesn't matter. Yeah. It's an interesting comparison to something like Percy Jackson, which was genre pushing. Yes. But that came out at a very different time. So.
Yeah, I liked it.
Cool.
I think that's my September wrap-up.
Sweet. Should I tell you about mine?
Yes, please. I'm sat.
Okay. The first book that I read was Star Splitter by Matthew J. Kirby. I loved this book. Matthew J. Kirby is a friend of mine. Mm-hmm. I've been working on him with the comic stuff over the years, which has been really awesome. And this is the first book of his that I've read. It's come out recently in the past couple of years. Mm-hmm. It is I think it's technically a YA sci-fi. Yeah. It's about a 17-year-old girl named Jessica Mathers.
That's a good name.
It is a good name. His names are really good in this book. Good diverse cast. It's not a huge cast of characters. It takes place mostly on a spaceship with a small crew that are traveling to a exoplanet that is in the Goldilocks zone that can host life, and it does have life on it. But there's a gigantic volcano. It's basically a big planet with one huge volcano.
Oh, cool.
And there was an ancient advanced alien civilization that went extinct because of it.
Oh, okay.
So Jessica Mathers and her parents are going to that planet to study it and to see if it's going to be good enough for colonization. So it's set in the far, far future, far distant technology. It's a relatively small book, 300 pages. I don't know how many words that is. Maybe like I'm not even going to guess. But I loved the scope of this book. I haven't quite finished it. I'm like literally one chapter away from being done. I'm such a slow reader. I just can't stay focused. That's why I need audiobooks. It's hard. It's really hard for me. So I'm really close to finishing it. It's one of the few books where it's like I can actually read it physically because it's so interesting to me. Like if you've been following our channel for a while, we loved Nona the Ninth. We've read that maybe 4 months ago.
Yeah.
That was the last book that I've read a physical copy of, and I just burned through it because I loved it so amazing. Much. It was really incredible, and this is the last book that I've read that has been
similar to that.
Similar to Nona the Ninth.
That's amazing.
I haven't read anything as emotionally stimulating or thought-provoking as this, like in a long time. So I give it very high praise for many reasons. The emotional and I guess intellectual pitch of this story, the real conflict is that in this world, teleportation is possible, and it's because they can clone your body. So they can clone your body from Earth to a spaceship that has a cloning machine. They basically send your data across this thing called the Tangle, which is like quantum... Internet. Yeah, exactly. And your data includes all of your DNA and your memories. So this book feels like it lives on in the tradition of old sci-fi books, where it philosophically asks you to tackle moral quandaries. Like
Interstellar.
What is similar to Interstellar, yes. If teleportation is possible, what is your consciousness? Like, what makes you you?
What makes you human?
Yeah. There's also some very difficult themes of like PTSD and suicide. So trigger warning for people who are sensitive to those type of topics. To me, it was very engaging because the main question that he asks is if you could avoid experiencing the worst day or the worst year of your life, would you do that? And because cloning is possible, they store your data, whatever makes you you, your memories and your DNA, onto a computer, and they send you out into outer space. And the main character, Jessica Mathers, spoiler alert, by the way, these are really important spoilers, so if I've already interested you in reading this book, I recommend you stop and read it for yourself. She clones herself onto the Theseus, which is the ship where her parents are waiting to take her down to planet Carver 1061C. And she does not want to be there. She's 17 years old. She's taken away from her grandparents. She hasn't seen her parents in 6 years.
Jeez.
Her parents think like, oh, our daughter wants to come be with us. But she's really pissed off that her parents left when she was so young. Abandoned her, basically. And she's forced to go be a scientist when she doesn't want to. Like, she's left her life as a high school student. She had a crush on a girl. She had all of her friends. She loves her grandparents, and she's just forced to be taken away.
Jeez.
And her parents aren't very remorseful about that. They feel like, we're doing this for you. We're forcing you to come live with us on this alien planet for who knows how long, for science, to advance humankind, to come live with us again. So there's a lot of conflict there. And while she's on the Theseus, some terrible, terrible things happen to her. And basically her ship crash lands on Theseus. And she makes a clone of herself when she crash lands. And I'm not doing a great job of explaining this, but...
it sounds complex,
yes.
so it's kind of hard to wrap all those nuances up in a 5-minute
No, I know. It's basically a nonlinear story where it jumps from Jessica Mathers when she is teleported to the Theseus and she's learning about like how teleportation works. There's not a lot of exposition. There's very little exposition. It's more about her like integrating with the people on the Theseus, like the captain and the doctors and the scientists, and meeting her parents again after 6 years, and there's really good conflict there. And the present time, every other chapter, it's like her on the ship on the Theseus, and then her on the planet after she's crash landed and she's become a clone. So part of the book comes from her clone's perspective, and the other half is from her perspective on the ship. Like whichever one is the real her. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a very, very engaging book, and I can't give everything away.
Yeah.
But I can't recommend it enough. I think it's its own contained story. The writing is kind of similar to like a Brandon Sanderson, where it doesn't get in the way of the story, but there's nothing special there, which I liked.
Yeah.
But every single conversation, it feels like the main character is engaging with other characters around her that revolve around her internal conflict. So every conversation is interesting. There's very little exposition, like I said, for a sci-fi book.
Yeah.
And the plot is also very brisk. Like there's every single chapter has a really good purpose for it occurring, and they're very short. Yeah. So for someone like me who reads a book and I get distracted so easily,
it's good to keep
me interested with each chapter, where it's like, this chapter, okay, it's only going to be like 12 pages. I promise there will be something good here. So it's like, okay, if I can just stick it out for 12 pages, then I can put down the book for the day.
Yeah, yeah.
It was really, really good.
That's
like
awesome.
I absolutely loved it.
I love reading sci-fi books that handle those kind of like really complex social, emotional dilemmas that we deal with as humans. Like, what makes you you?
Yeah.
Fundamentally, is it just the physical DNA and the electronic impulses that happen from your brain to the rest of your body, or is there something so innately human and tangible about your original form and like your own emotional things that have happened to you while you're in this body? Like what happens if there's just a new body with all that data there, but
which one is
how
the
fun
real
to
you?
Explore that.
Yes. And one thing I forgot to mention is that when you teleport yourself, they have to create your clone at another location. So that means they have to destroy your host body. Jeez. So what does that mean about consciousness as well?
Yeah.
Because when you get teleported, you don't remember dying.
Yeah.
You're just a new clone. So,
that's so cool. There's a great episode of Doctor Who that handles that same kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Sci-fi is so great at handling complex human emotions in such a abstracted way, but you can still empathize and understand all of those things.
Well, it's actually not abstract, because you can live out a simulation like this where teleportation is possible, and it can force you to ask those difficult moral questions. Like, if you could teleport yourself, would you?
If you had the chance to
even
change
if you
your
knew,
fate, would you?
What's that from?
Brave.
Okay, great. Is that a meme? It must be a meme.
I guess. I don't know. People say it.
It sounded familiar to me, and I thought you were making fun of me.
Oh, no, I wasn't.
You're just quoting something randomly.
Yeah, I was just quoting something randomly.
Okay, I do that too. No, you're good. The other book that I have been reading is The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson.
You could build a house with that brick.
I know, look at this thing. It's like 1,000-something pages. It's really big. It's my favorite book of all time. The new book is coming out soon, the 6th book in the Stormlight Archive. And I'm trying to reread this one to catch up with the series, but it's difficult for me.
Yeah.
I love this book, and I would love to go on a very big tirade about long books. I'm not going to bore people with it, but I'll save that discussion for another day. I'm also not going to explain what The Way of Kings is about, just to say that, like, I think there's going to be an increasing trend in long books and fantasy, especially fantasy. Not just because of The Way of Kings or Brandon Sanderson's books, because he is very popular.
Yeah.
But some of the books that we've read on this podcast, like Fourth Wing was very long, and that was very popular.
Sarah J. Maas's first books aren't long,
but now her books are getting longer.
Newer ones get longer and longer.
And I'm okay with long books. I used to love them. Like Assassin's Apprentice was a very long book that we've reviewed on this podcast. It was one of our first ones, and that's a very long book.
Yeah. Well, I remember sometimes when we talk about, like, spending Audible credits, and we're like, if the book isn't more than 15 hours, I'm not going to use my credit on a book. Yeah,
and there's still a part of me that is afraid of, like, not getting my value's worth out of an Audible credit. But I wonder if there's, like, a financial incentive to writing longer books with things like Kindle, where I think the author gets paid per page.
That's interesting.
I wonder if publishers are even going to, like, push authors for longer books when maybe authors aren't prepared, or they aren't interested in writing a long book.
Or they aren't capable.
I'm not. Because there are plenty of books like that.
It's hard to write a book that huge.
It's hard to write a small book.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we, for some reason, I feel like underestimate how difficult it is to write a really big book. Something like The Way of Kings, it is massive, but it really does read like 3 books in one. And I'm stimulated the entire time while I'm reading it. There's tons of world building, there's tons of exposition, that type of stuff I like, and I know it can bore you.
Yeah.
So I'm cognizant of that. But there are 3 POVs in The Way of Kings, and it swaps between each of them. It's told non-linearly, so it's massive.
A lot on
There's
the
so
board
much
here.
to handle.
Yeah.
And a author who isn't prepared for something like that could write like 1,200 pages of a mess that could be condensed down to 200 pages.
Which is how I feel about Crescent City. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, Aquitar is a good length, I think, for Sarah J. Maas.
Yeah.
And I would really not want to read one of her longer books because I'm worried that it would just be like the same size of story as Aquitar, but bloated times 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel about them.
Yeah. Where I don't know what the incentive is to write a longer book. And I'm worried that books are going to get bloated for, I don't know, financial reasons or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because, like, a lot of the current trending authors for, like, YA fantasy specifically are definitely leaning into that more epic fantasy genre length. Which is just kind of crazy to me.
I'm okay with it, but
I think there's a big
okay
distinction between YA fantasy and epic fantasy.
Absolutely.
And it's hard when people think epic fantasy is just YA fantasy with twice the chapters.
Yeah.
When it's so much more complex than that.
Yes. I think epic fantasy is very much its own genre. And I think a lot of people have the misconception that YA fantasy is just you have younger characters. When I think a part of it does have to do with the length and the scope of the book.
Yeah.
Epic fantasy is supposed to be epic. It's its own thing. And I think there is a world where you can write an epic YA fantasy, maybe.
I think you could too.
I mean, The Way of Kings has younger characters.
Yeah.
The youngest characters are like 19.
Yeah.
But it does feel like an adult book. I don't know. The YA books that I've read feel so much more juvenile.
Yes.
Like, not just the way that they're written, but their voice, the main characters, the story that's being told.
Yeah. There's also an interesting thing on that where authors seem to, at least from my perspective and opinions, they'll try to write longer books, but then they'll simultaneously try to cater to younger generations by using language that younger generations use.
I can't stand that.
Such as when people say, in Fourth Wing, Violet is like, I'm in my revenge era. And I wanted to throw the book out the window in that sentence. Yeah. I'm sorry. It's cringy and weird, and you need to pick.
Yeah.
You need to pick one.
Well, we did talk about that in our review. I recommend you watch it, but maybe it's kind of like Fourth Wing is the trendsetter right now for YA epic fantasy.
And people are also pushing for a new label for that, which is New Adult, which I think is interesting and I agree with.
Yeah.
Because New Adult also tries to capture
the scope of epic fantasy and the voice of YA fantasy.
And also sexually explicit material. Because sometimes people will say, Fourth Wing is YA. Okay, my 16-year-old daughter can read Fourth Wing when they should not, in my opinion. Because it is sexually explicit and it is for adult audiences.
Yeah, so it should be new adult.
I don't know. Genres are so interesting and they're constantly changing and evolving and also sometimes mixing into one another on the edges of where they meet.
My concern is that we're going to get... And Fourth Wing did hold my attention.
I liked Fourth Wing.
That's an understatement. it's an overstatement for me to say that it held my attention. It did, but I would not have read it without the podcast.
Yes.
It's just not my genre. I'm not saying it's a bad book. I think it's a good book. But it's really difficult for an author to hold your attention for that long. It's pretty big.
Yeah.
Something like Gideon the Ninth, I think, straddles the line between YA and epic fantasy.
I think so too.
It feels more epic fantasy than YA.
The scope is bigger.
Yeah.
For sure.
But the characters are so iconoclastic. Yeah, but the scope is really big. And not every author can do that.
Yeah.
I'm worried.
Tamsin Muir is a god among men.
I know.
I mean.
She really is just a genius. But I'm petitioning for... Okay, if you're an author that wants to try to write longer books because you're like, I love Fourth Wing, I love Gideon the Ninth, I love Way of Kings, whatever, then I say, go for it.
Yeah.
Like, go ahead and fail at that. But if you're... no, really, I mean that.
Yes.
If it's something that you really love to do.
Experiment it. Try it. Figure it out.
If you're a publisher or if you feel like the market is trending towards larger books, and you're like, I'm just going to pump this out. I don't really care.
We need at least 60 chapters.
Yeah. I haven't done enough work with my world building. I don't have enough characters to make this interesting. I don't have enough plot to, like, sustain a story that lasts like 17, 18, 20, 25 hours.
Yeah.
Then you have to condense your story. Like, as a consumer...
And there's nothing wrong with that.
No. What's wrong is, like, making a story that is too big for its breeches.
Yeah. Yeah.
As a consumer, I'm just done with long books that have nothing to say.
Yeah.
Like, cut it down to its bare minimum. Like,
yeah.
Please, I'm begging for you.
Well, we've talked multiple times on this podcast, specifically in our Goose Girl episode and our Assassin's Apprentice? Throne of Glass episode, where sometimes that scope can get too big, like in Throne of Glass. And if she had condensed it down and been more hyper-specific about the plot, it would have been way better. And Goose Girl does that exact thing phenomenally.
Yeah. Goose Girl is phenomenally. Goose Girl has a brilliant scope.
Yeah.
And when I say scope, I'm not just talking about, is your book the right size?
No.
I'm talking about for your book.
Pace, setting.
Yeah.
It's, oh gosh, I love books.
Yes. Well, I love books too. When I say that I'm sick of long books, I'm not saying I don't want to read any more Brandon Sanderson Way of Kings stuff. I love Brandon Sanderson's books because they are long. So, like, these two books, they have the right scope for each of their books.
Yes.
If this book was 12,000 pages long, I would have thrown it away.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
I feel the same way about my Revelle book. It was very, as long as it needed to be.
Yes. And my concern is that people who want to write books that are this size, where they have one really strong idea, a good main character, an interesting world, are trying to write them this long because they think it'll be more marketable. That's what I'm scared of.
Stop.
So please stop.
I don't want that to happen.
Something like The Way of Kings, it has to justify its length.
Yeah.
So there are 3 main characters. Like I said, there's a gigantic world. He's planned a 6-book series, maybe more.
Yeah.
Right? He's prepared to write a story that large. And it takes him the requisite amount of time to complete that manuscript. Mm-hmm. So he plans for the whole thing to be interesting from beginning to middle to end. The reason why it's taking me so long is because I've read it 6 times and I'm kind of forcing myself to, and I don't really want to. Uh-huh. But it's very dense. So I'm getting a lot out of every page.
Yeah.
I guess that's the end of my tirade. I just want books that fit their length.
Yes. Stop trying to fit your book into as many hyper categories as you can to get as many purchases as you can. And just figure out what your book needs to be.
Yes. That's how I feel. Like, I've read some great books this week. I love Star Splitter and I've been loving The Way of Kings. And it just makes me hesitate for the future of fantasy. Because I'm really worried we're just going to get more bloated books.
Yeah, well, even Brandon Sanderson also has inspired many authors to try their hand at multiverse or Cosmere kind of stuff. I have a lot of reservations.
Yeah, I think books like Fourth Wing, books like The Way of Kings, all Brandon Sanderson's books are very popular, and more authors and publishers, I think, are going to say, oh, the new trend is long books, so everyone just write a long book.
Yeah.
When that's not the interesting aspect of books on its own.
Yeah, well, like Sarah J. Maas is starting to do a multiverse with all of her series, and it just, it seems like it kind of came out of the blue because now it's trendy. So she didn't have the groundwork from book 1 to set all of that connection up. And I could be wrong, but that's just how it felt as a viewer reading it.
Yeah, I haven't read enough.
It felt gimmicky.
Yeah, I haven't read enough Sarah J. Maas to...
I won't make you.
No, it's okay. We could for entertainment value.
I won't make me read it again.
But to be frank, our Sarah J. Maas book videos have not done well. Woo! What a relief. Well, I think that's about the end of our episode. I think so.
I think that's a pretty good wrap-up.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for watching.
Yes, thank you so much. If you want Tanner to read Crescent City, please comment below.
Please don't.
Kidding.
Please don't. Please don't. This month, for October, we're doing a readathon. We're going to read vampire books. We're going to read Twilight. We're going to read Dracula. Serpent in the Wind of the Night. And Salem's Lot. So that'll be so much fun. Please stick around for that. You can join our Discord too.
Put a link in our bio for that.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about these books as we read them. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave a like if you made it to this far.
Yeah, let us know. Let us know what books you read during this month.
Thank you all for watching.
Bye-bye.
Bye.